first off, congratulations on this movie. When I think about how I want to see, not just in documentaries, but all movies, more movies about people talking to each other, then this falls, this is like literally about how important that is. So that's really wonderful. Does a story like this, how does it come to you? How do you know it's the thing to do? Is it a story, or is it about a person? I mean, how did you start making this?
Yeah, it started very different than it ended up. And first, thank you guys all for coming. It means a lot. We know it's a busy season, so thank you. So it started as our reaction to Charlottesville, August 2017, when there was the white supremacy, hate and violent riots, and the murder of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville is when we realized, and it's kind of embarrassing that it took that and a sign of our white privilege and pushed us even further to wanting to do this, that I studied the civil rights movement at the University of Virginia, and that's where we met. And I studied that as a history major. And so seeing these white supremacists who were younger than I was, just so full of hate and wanting to make a film about the opposite of that. And to me, Clarkston represented the opposite, because these people are from warring countries and ethnicities, religions, and tribes, and they radically choose love for one another. So that's how it all started. And Heval was one of our main subjects in the film, and several other remarkable refugees in Clarkston. And then about 6 months into filming, Heval had the opportunity to meet Chris. And so that's when real life happens, and you kind of go with it.
I think a lot of what drew us to the story was a kind of a sense of desperation. This was 2017, and we were looking at the world around us and seeing so much hate and anger. We were more polarized than we have been in either of our lifetimes, and hate and extremism of all kinds was on the rise. And so I think we both felt desperate to understand why these narratives of hate were resonating with so many Americans, and also desperate to know if healing was possible for our country, and if so, what that looked like. And so the process of making this film felt like a way for us to explore these things and see what healing might look like if it was.
So it starts with the town, and then Heval and Chris, become the people that you follow. Tell me about earning their trust to be in this movie this way, to have this be on film.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so much of what we do as filmmakers, especially obviously documentary filmmakers, is to build and maintain the trust of the people who are entrusting us with their stories. And I think a documentary's emotional depth is totally contingent on our ability to do that well. And so I think, especially as I consider, what we're asking of people not just to share their tidied, sanitized social media versions of themselves. We're asking them to entrust us with their complexity and the fullness of who they are. And so I think for us, we went about that by spending a lot of time with everyone in our film when there were not cameras around, and being a part of their life and their world, showing up in times of crisis, and also inviting them into our lives and our worlds, and sharing our vulnerabilities with them. But I'll also say, there's a limitation to that, and Aaron and I were confronted by that a few weeks ago. If you've been to our website recently, you will have seen a statement from Aaron and me detailing this. But a few weeks ago, Chris called us and let us know that the way that it was shared with us about how he and Melissa were connected to Arno, that's not actually how they met. And so what you see in our film and what had been shared with us was that Melissa was desperate for help and Googled how to get a loved one out of a hate group, found Arno, and reached out. But what they shared with us recently was that they were actually connected with Arno through the producers of a docuseries that's completely unrelated to our film, and has actually since been canceled. And so the story of Melissa Googling and finding Arno was created as part of that show to kind of erase the production's hand in connecting them. And so since Chris shared that with us a few weeks ago, we've obviously had follow-up conversations, and we feel confident that the rest of Chris and Arno's relationship as it's shown in our film is accurately represented. And, we do still maintain a lot of trust and confidence in them. And while we wish they'd made a different decision with us about this specifically, we've been in a relationship with them for 5 years, and that doesn't, get erased from one decision. But I think if anything, it points to the challenges that we face as documentary filmmakers, and the need for us to be transparent about these challenges so that we can navigate them well together as an industry.
Well, I appreciate your candor about that. It's interesting because, I certainly don't feel like it changes what this movie's about, which is about the hard de-radicalization of people and communities that come together. And it's interesting because I think of movies like this as ongoing conversations. I mean, you must have, like, in making it, just like been constantly talking about, okay, what are we shooting? Why are we shooting it? I mean, is that the case when you're like, are you always talking about, what are we making here?
I like to just shoot everything. I'm one of those people that just says, like, okay, DP, like, just roll. Didn't put a little more thought into it.
The question also points to what is so challenging about post-production, because you're staring at thousands of hours of footage and figuring out how do we make this a 90-minute compelling film, which is, every editor's dream.
Well, especially because it was 2 films, like we still kept filming. The film was called Clarkston, the working title, the name of the town, and we kept filming Clarkston because we had no idea what was going to happen with Chris and Heval. And it wasn't really until that we got into edit that we realized, like, oh, wow. And we were really conflicted, especially I was, dedicated to this Clarkston story. And so we have amazing executive producers and advisors and mentors who really helped us realize the power of their story.
Yeah, and I think what became the kind of guiding light for us in terms of what do we shoot, what is the story, what are we witnessing that we need to make sure we're capturing, I think that became really clear when we landed on the title of the film, because I think for so long we felt like, is it a story about Chris? Is it Chris and Heval? Is it Clarkston? And I think once we really established that at its core, this felt like a film about what it is to seek refuge, and I very much include Chris in that description, to seek a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of safety, a sense of hope, and also what it is to be a source of refuge for somebody else, to be a source of community and acceptance and welcome. And so I think as we gained clarity on that gave us a lot of clarity about, okay, well then what do we need to capture to illustrate that? And, what is staying on the editing room floor that doesn't, serve that goal?
Yeah, I mean, the refuge aspect is interesting because Heval, who is clearly found, is refuge, but it always clearly likes to, I mean, it's not like questioning it, but he wants to kind of like, he wants to talk to people. He wants to go like, what do you think? He wants to bring himself out a little bit of his comfort zone. Clearly, it's very important to him to do that. Tell me about the insight you got into Heval, like shooting him. Like, what do you think makes him tick?
Us shooting him makes him tick. I think these are our friends in the front row laughing at us. So I think that, and this kind of goes back to what Din was talking about with the nature of our industry. And I think, most people who see documentaries these days might actually be seeing more like docu-series or unscripted stuff. And so they have an idea of, or news pieces, they have an idea of like, oh, I'm going to say, yes, you can film me and I will be filmed like in my tidy house, the Instagram version of me for like 1 hour every 3 months for a year. No, that's not what we did. We wanted to film him all day, every day, many, many days without much warning and in his dirty scrubs, So I think that it was a kind of rude awakening that we wanted to do that, but that's what we needed to do to get this story and to get his story. And one of the coolest things that I think has happened a lot of really cool things have happened, and the impact that we even got to have making the film was really powerful. But when Chris, Heval, Arno, Melissa, and Kajin, and Amina, and everybody, when they saw this film, we had to show it to them on Zoom during COVID, sadly, but we were able to see their faces. So we weren't watching, we were watching their faces. And it was incredible what they said and what we saw in their faces, that they all really felt like it was their stories. And people in Clarkston feel like it was their stories. So I think they all realized it was worth the immense amounts of time that we made them let us film.
I'll just add, in terms of what makes Heval tick and what compels him to even build a relationship with somebody like Chris, I think a lot of it comes from what he survived back in Syria, and knowing that he saw the impact of that on his family, and especially on his dad, and felt like freedom, democracy, peace is not a given. And I think for Heval, he felt like his way of even protecting our country was crossing this huge place of divide and reaching out to somebody like Chris. He felt like was essential. And I think, he mentions this in the film, but they arrived here 2 weeks after 9/11 as a family of Muslims with 2 teenage boys, and were welcomed by our country, which is a pretty incredible thing when we think about what our country felt like 2 weeks after 9/11. And to see what it had become by this point, it was 2017, I think to him, he felt like, I know where this leads. I know where this road goes. And so I think he felt really compelled to say, this is something I can do to help prevent that, is meeting Chris and getting to know him.
I like that you show their disagreements. I mean, that's kind of important, right? I mean, like we can't believe that they just agree on everything, or that maybe they don't talk about things. I mean, that clearly was important to you too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that points to the non-sanitized version of them for sure. And it would be greatly misleading to have shared a story with you where they meet once and all is well and they agree on everything, including gun control, and that felt really accurate to their experience. That piece of it.
What's the status of their working together these days? What's going on with that?
Yeah, well, really exciting updates on a lot of them, but Chris especially just bought his first house. Wow. So that's pretty amazing, and he's doing really, really well. And Melissa and the kids. Heval now has 2 sons. You see the first son in there. And he and Kajin are both, cardiologists and doing a lot in the community. Amina is still around, just living it up and making Clarkston better every day. And Ted is now a county commissioner for DeKalb County, where Clarkston is. And Arno, Chris, and Heval are all still committed to this work of preventing radicalization and helping get people out of these hateful situations.
Yeah, so it was written in the end credits about the program that Chris and Heval created, but it's pretty incredible. They tailored the 12 steps that they'd created that was called Hate Anonymous at this time to a program that helps first responders, active duty military, and veterans process their work-related trauma. And so they've done several programs with several police departments around the country. And so it's, when I think about Chris's journey from who he was to somebody that's addressing systemic hate and oppression, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And then Chris, he actually just left Parents for Peace, but he had been working with Parents for Peace, which is an amazing organization that helps people leave hate groups. They have a hotline for anyone who's worried about a loved one. This is what Melissa needed but didn't have. Worried about a loved one who might be becoming radicalized. And then they also work with all of our policymakers and helping them understand hate and extremism as a public health crisis, and understanding the communities who are more vulnerable and susceptible to being groomed by hate groups, and how we build resilience within those communities. So it's amazing what they're up to.
I mean, we take this movie around and you show people, are they surprised to see a community like Clarkston, like what that looks like?
I think especially people in Georgia and Atlanta, like people live 4 miles away from it and might not have even known about it. And there's communities like this all over the country. So maybe not quite as diverse, but there are communities outside of most major cities that have at least 1, 2, or 3, ethnicities of refugee groups. And so, the original goal was to get people to volunteer and help welcome them. And now the impact goal that's part of it. Another huge part is bridge building. So helping, we really want to have screenings where mosques, churches, and synagogues screen together, Republicans and Democrats, kids from fancy private schools and inner city schools, just really bridging as many divides as we can. And then the big impact that we know the film can make is what we call helping create more Melissas or empower more Melissas. And so we're hoping to get the film and to more, people that are currently or formerly incarcerated and their family members, veterans, active duty. And then another area that Parents for Peace told us about is just middle and high school aged guys are just really at risk for being groomed into that.
I mean, this movie is relevant at any time, but to me, it seems to have a particular resonance now, considering how much the world is hurting right now and how high tensions are with what's going on. Can you talk about how you see this film having a dialogue with the world?
Yes. I think we hope our film can rekindle our ability to empathize with each other, which is something that feels rare these days. And, we're not going to sit up here and tell you that our film will solve the complicated crisis that is unfolding in Israel and Gaza right now. We're not going to tell you that our film will fix that. But I think what we do hope our film can do is equip each of us to become cultivators of peace in our families and our communities and our areas of influence, because when I consider what we witness in the story, so much of those things are replicable for each of us. Imagine if each of us was willing to do what Chris did and look inward and consider the pain and the trauma and the loss and the fear that shapes our anger. What if each of us was willing to do what Heval did, to encounter someone who deeply opposed him from a posture of curiosity and open-heartedness? And what would our world look like if our communities were committed to radical acceptance that was not based on likeness? Our world would look really different. And so our hope is that each of us will take these things forward, and not that is simple or easy or straightforward, but I do think peace is possible when we're committed to cultivating it individually.
Thank you. That was just lovely. We want to take a couple of questions, and Armando is going to walk around with a mic. So raise your hand, and he'll give you a mic to ask the question.
Hi. How did you get permission to film the Klan, or was that footage from somewhere else?
That is, a great question. We did not film that. It's pretty crazy that Chris was actually in a documentary about being in the KKK that the BBC made, that we found, and we licensed that footage.
We're always pleased to report that we have never attended a KKK rally in person.
Especially as a Jewish filmmaker with a black DP. We did go to Chris and Heval's first meeting, though, so we took a risk.
So I just wanted to compliment you. I love the film. Thank you. And thank you for making it. And I love the pantheon of super women that you have as advisors and producers.
Agreed.
We love them, too.
Yeah.
And
They're badasses. And Stephen Nemeth. But it's not really a question, but I just wanted to compliment you guys on really getting these moments of stillness where it looks like the primary characters are just thinking or sitting with something for a minute and feeling that so much is revealed in their faces at those moments. And I also think, I haven't met your editor, but your editor is badass.
Amen.
So,
Yes.
Catherine Garrison.
That's it.
Write it down.
I just
Catherine
wanted to
Garrison.
say all
We are
that.
both first-time directors,
Oh, really?
so clearly Catherine had her work cut out for
Wow.
her.
Well, super power. Thank you.
I really loved your film. It was wonderful. And it's so uplifting, which a lot of the docs really aren't. So I really appreciated that. But I was wondering, excuse me, about Heval, if he ever talked about how he got over what he went through, because he mentioned one line in there about how angry he was after the neo-Nazis in Germany, and then coming here, I'm sure he had a tough time.
That's a great question. I think you hear a little bit when he's talking on the phone to Chris in those first conversations about how he did have hate. I think, like Den mentioned, Heval's dad, I think that once he got to America, things just opened up and got a lot brighter, except for what, happened with his dad and continued to happen to his dad. So I think that has always been one of his fears, and he's worked really hard to make sure that doesn't happen to him. And that's part of why he wanted to meet somebody who opposed him. So that exactly what Den said, like he knew what could happen having been in Syria and having grown up in, come of age in Clarkston, and didn't want our country to go there, doesn't want our country to go there. We're very at risk of all these people who end up in Clarkston are coming from countries that sort of look like what we look like right now. And that's terrifying. So I think rather than be angry and hateful, he used that to fuel him forward rather than to get stuck.
I'd like to thank you very much for the film. I didn't think I was going to like it, but I had somebody who wanted to come see it. So I went ahead, and I'm glad I did, because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. My question is this. 5 years is a long time to work on one film, and your credits are extensive, and you probably don't want to answer this question, but how did you find all those people, and how much did this cost?
Cost $986,000, and we found those people because we love them, those people, and they love us. I think we just have a really amazing community who were passionate about this and got them to be passionate about it too.
Yeah, and I think it also illustrates how people were thirsty and hungry for this story and wanted it to exist. And so many of the people that you saw listed in the credits, there are so many because they were making, $50, $100 contributions, and that it's, all those drops in the bucket got us where we are. And that is what fueled us in so many ways, knowing that there was a hunger for this, that people were eager in the same way that we were eager to understand what does healing look like, and eager for solutions, to your point about how so many documentaries are illustrating and helping us understand the complexity of the problems that are in front of us, which is really important too. This film had some solutions, and so I think people were really thirsty for that and eager to support us in whatever way that they could, which we're really grateful for. And I'm also so curious what you thought the film was going to be. And I'm grateful that you came, so thank you.
What did you think it was going to be?
You don't have to share if you don't want to. We're putting you on the spot now.
The other question I was curious about, are there any other cities like Clarkston?
There are, yes. Aurora, Colorado, outside of Denver, is very similar. Portland, Maine is very similar. So those are probably the two that have lots and lots of refugees from lots and lots of countries. But then there's like huge cities like Houston, and then different suburbs around Houston have different populations from different ethnicities. But the most similar to Clarkston that we've heard and found are Aurora and Portland, Maine.
Well, I think that response simply tells you that when you put things in context, you make something more than just what people think it's going to be. You make something that kind of feels like it could live on and always be resonant. So thank you both for coming here.
I want to say one thing about the resonant that Den and I have been talking a lot about today, in terms of how sadly relevant the film is right now, is that one thing Den said when we were discussing it this morning is that, I make sure I get this right, but that like every time during the last 5 years that our film becomes more relevant is when our world is experiencing immense pain. And so that's hard for us to sit on. And we want the film to be a tool for peace.
I can't think of a better way to end this talk. Thank you both for coming here tonight. Thank you all for coming. And the conversation can continue in the
Free drinks.
lobby with drinks.